Welcome to Improv Your Parenting, the art of turning parenting into play. Today we're joined by Sonja Stetzler. Sonja is the founder and CEO of Effective Connecting and Communications Specialist Coach with Battleground. She provides executive communication coaching and communication-centered training for mid to senior level leaders within business and healthcare organizations. Realizing the key to success for most professionals is the ability to authentically communicate and connect with others, Sonja's programs teach clients communication tools that pot their success and bottom line. Sonja is an international speaker and has held positions in management, sales, quality assurance, training, facilitation, and education. She's authored chapters in several textbooks on communication topics and has conducted research that demonstrated the positive impact of applied improvisation techniques on empathetic communication skills. She recently delivered a TEDx talk entitled Moving from Battleground to Common Ground with Improvisation. Sonja received her BS from Winthrop University. She received her MA in Organizational Communication and Executive Coaching Certificate from Queen's University, and is a certified design thinker as well as conversational intelligence coach. She holds a certificate in arts-based experiential learning, creating futures that work. Sonja is a member of the National Speakers Association, the International Coach Federation, and the Applied Improvisation Network. Sonja, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I appreciate it.
I'm so happy to be here talking with you as well.
I'm going to start off this conversation the way I start all of them, which is asking you one question, which is, how do you interact with kids and what role does improv play in that interaction?
So my background is my kids are grown. When I started using improv with my kids, this was over a decade ago, and I consider it an accidental improvisation moment. With that said, I've come to realize that all our conversations are improvised.
Yes.
I don't know what you're going to say. You don't know what I'm going to say. And it's all created in the moment. To take you back on how I started on this journey, when I started my coaching practice way over a decade ago, it was in 2009, I decided that the best way for me to market my services was to speak. Because I had been a speaker in sales and as a trainer, I thought, I'm comfortable with this. This is how I'm going to market my services. And a couple of friends who were professional speakers suggested I take an improv class. I said, sure, that sounds like it's fun. I was not good at it. 2 years and approximately 100 classes later, it's a Sunday afternoon, and my improv instructor is getting really frustrated with me. And he asked, Sonja, why are you missing the gifts? And a gift in improv is a word or a piece of dialogue that helps to carry that scene forward. And I was going, I don't know. Actually, I did know because I was so fearful of what I was going to say. And if we'd be able to move the scene forward, fear was my block.
Yeah.
But I responded, I have no idea. And then he yelled at me, you're not listening. And then I fired back. I am a trained coach. I know how to listen. Later that night, when I got home, I really started to think about this. Was I really listening? My answer was no, I wasn't. Fear was blocking my head. Over time, I learned to trust myself that whatever came out of my mouth was going to be okay. I didn't have to edit myself. I didn't have to censor what I was going to say. That my ensemble members would be able to pick up on whatever I said and do something with it. And that allowed me to be more present, listen fully to what was going on in the scene. At that point, I realized, wow, if I'm not listening as a trained coach, I wonder if my colleagues aren't really listening either. And going back to that time, probably in that first year of improv, my oldest son was a senior in high school, and we had been butting heads all year long. It was miserable for me. That's probably as well for him.
For him, yeah. Both of you. Yeah.
You can recall, if you have teenagers, it's a very challenging time for both of you because your child is trying to assert their independence and you're trying to keep them safe. And one afternoon, it was spring, he thought he knew it all, and he comes home from school. He had a month before graduation, and he announced, I'm going to go to this party tonight and I'm going to break my curfew. Now, my usual response would have been, heck no, you're not. Then we'd escalate into shouting, and then the argument would concur, and we'd both he'd end up going to the party anyway, and I'd end up huffing and puffing and thinking about, okay, so what can I use as punishment this time? I can ground him, steal his keys, whatever. In that nanosecond, after he announced he was going to this party and breaking his curfew, it was just a nanosecond response. And I believe it was because of my improv practice. I responded with yes. And let's talk about the consequences.
Totally shifted it.
It was a 180-degree shift. And that opened up a dialogue. It actually changed our relationship.
Tell me about that.
I think that for the first time, that signaled to him that I was willing to listen. Going back to my listening episode with my improv instructor. And he got to explain to me why it was so important to go to this party, to hang out with this particular social group. And in turn, I got to express my concern for his safety because I knew they'd be drinking.
Ah, yes. What was the outcome of all of this?
For the rest of the year, we were able to talk things out. And subsequently, when he went off to college and he did get himself into trouble, he was able to pick up the phone, call me, and we talked through it. The time that he pledged to the fraternity, he was a freshman. And honestly, this scared the bejesus out of me. I mean, with his experience with partying and all that, I could just see that, this is not going to end in a good place. However, when he called me to ask, Mom, should I join this fraternity? I didn't give him my opinion. I said, well, tell me about it. I listened. I allowed him to talk through it. And by the end of our conversation, his comments to me were, you know what, Mom, I don't think I'm ready. And inside I was like, yay.
And I didn't tell you to, so don't blame me.
Like, what a mature decision. Awesome. Yeah, I think maybe just wait a year.
Sure.
And he did. He was still able to pick up the phone and call me because of the partying and whatever that subsequent year. He got in trouble. He gave me a call and told me that he was going to be suspended from school and that I would be getting a call from the dean. I was appreciative that, yes, I'm glad he gave me the heads up. The dean did call. We were able to work out his situation. And he's in his early 30s now, and this happened over a decade ago, and we're still having these great conversations. And I attribute it to that pivotal moment, that yes and moment.
Wow. There's so much here I want to get into. A couple of the first things, though, is one, I want to note how late in the sort of childhood development process you came to this realization, which I think is heartening because it also means other people, wherever they are in the age of their children and their parenting journey, it's not too late for them to start using this stuff. I think that's awesome.
Absolutely. The earlier you can start this, the better. For me, it was the teenage years because I have a younger son as well. And I learned through my older son, I really wasn't listening. I was able to listen better with my younger son. It's never too late. I mean, even with my husband.
Sure, just a better relationship all around.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me then about what changed for you once you started just doing that listening and taking the pause between what you heard, the offer, and your response to it. How did things change because of those conscious choices that you made?
It's really important, the listening skills, because as I have grown and have explored, why does improv work? There's a couple of things that I have learned through this. What do people most want? And it doesn't matter how old you are, especially for kids, because we are so used to, as adults, telling them what to do. Oftentimes we don't listen. We don't have to agree. A yes and is not agreement. It's yes, I've heard you. And the and builds on top of what they've given you. So that to me was really important. It's important Because these days, when I was raising my kids, we didn't have smartphones and we weren't as distracted. I think we probably were distracted, but we weren't as distracted. And kids want to be heard. They can tell when you're not listening to them. And I think that also plays into their self-esteem. Well, if mom or dad isn't listening to me, I don't feel good about that. Or that puts a barrier in the relationship between you and your child.
One of the things that I'm also picking up from this wasn't about play or being silly. It was about accepting what they are giving you, whatever that is, and saying, how do I work with this? What can I build with this with them? And so it's not about funny. It's not about silliness. It's sort of about stepping back and being like, who's that? And what are they telling me?
Yes. And I would say too that the ability to be heard, another thing that we did is when my kids were young, grade school age, one of their favorite activities to do at their dinner table, and it helped, I wanted to encourage conversation, is I bought this book called The Book of Questions for Kids. They would always ask, Mom, let's do the book of questions tonight. My husband sometimes worked late and he wasn't around at dinner time. So it was just me and the kids. My husband and I, when we were in our courting stage, I had purchased this book of questions that really explored our values, what we believed in, and helped us to get to know each other a little bit better. The book of questions is very similar, but it's geared to kids. Maybe the start, unbeknownst to me, of the improv, because we would go around the table and it would be some questions. Would you rather be a river or a pond? And just simple questions like that, but it allowed them to express what they thought. And I got to help shape the values I wanted to instill in them, because some of the questions were values based or moral based and just an assortment of questions. But I noticed that my kids really enjoyed the opportunity to express their thoughts and opinions.
I would imagine too, at that time, you listened to those thoughts and opinions. You were there for them, and they probably appreciated that too.
Yes. And thinking about that time in their lives where we got to talk about all kinds of things that were, not necessarily going on in the world, but what was going on in their world, and how could they relate to a situation that perhaps they experienced at school. That was their favorite activity. And then as I got older, in those middle school years and high school years, of course, they're really fighting for their independence. I wouldn't say fighting literally, but they're,
It's
looking
a struggle.
at their parents, and their peers become really important. However, I think that allowing us to do the book of questions helped to build a foundation for our future relationships. Because even with my younger son, I mean, he's very articulate, and I think, oh, where he got that from? Possibly, answering the questions from the book of questions. That was improv, if you think about conversations.
Yeah, because nobody knew what was going to come out of the book, and then you would discuss it and create whatever. You said they're both adults now, and they're kind of doing their things. Do you see these communication styles, this articulateness, coming out in the way they interact with the world? If so, can you share a little bit about that?
Yes. My younger son is an engineer, and typically engineers have a different way of thinking. I tend to be more right brain, and engineers tend to be more left brain. However, when he was going through college, he was able to, and he told me, he said, Mom, because the interviewers my employer is commenting on how many internships I had. I mean, he had like 4 or 5 internships. I believe, and he wasn't like a straight A student. He was pretty average, B's sprinkled in with a couple of C's. However, his ability to articulate his thoughts, I think that came from earlier practice, because he's very articulate and can express. When he's explaining an engineering concept, that's like, way over my head. He's got this unique ability to explain it, to break it down so that I understand it.
Sort of the Neil deGrasse Tyson of engineering.
Yes, I think that's a good way to describe him. I think that's been very useful for him in his
That is
team.
a great thing to be able to do, and to be able to communicate beyond the engineer community to everyone. Do you think some of that, I mean, obviously the conversations you had based on the book of the questions, do you think that more, or at least a component of that, is because you teach communication? Like, this is what you do. Do you think that it's beyond just the improvisational component, or into the holistic experience of, this is what mom is as a communication capabilities builder?
I didn't start out as a communications specialist. I started out as a dietitian. And I was kind of frustrated. And I got my master's in communication
Uh-huh.
because we weren't really taught how to do counseling. It was all educate, educate, educate. And since that time, motivational interviewing and coaching came along. So I didn't have the training for these skills. That came later, sort of as my second career.
Huh?
And that was something I noticed in my first career. The people who were the most successful were the ones who could communicate effectively. I didn't feel like I had those skills. So that drove my interest. Another component to that, which I think is having a science background, is I got kind of geeky on this. I did a training program called Conversational Intelligence. It's really marrying our communication skills with our neurochemistry, which, for
Mm.
instance, when people are in the adult world, if you're in a meeting and you contribute something to that meeting and the response is, oh, we've already done that. Well, what does that do to the person who contributed? And this happens in a nanosecond. What happens is that your amygdala, that piece of your brain that is there solely to protect you, it produces cortisol. That's your stress hormone. And that puts you in the state of fight or flight. And this happens just in that nanosecond. It happens so quickly that you don't even realize what's happening, but you just know that you're going to withdraw. You're not going to participate anymore. Or you could have the other response where you fight back. Now, if the response to that is, oh, that's interesting, we've done that, but tell me more about your idea. What does that do? That encourages more contributions. But the neurochemistry on that is that you've been heard, and this initiates the production of oxytocin. Oxytocin is a hormone or the neurotransmitter that's associated with trust and bonding. And what do we need in relationships? In order to have a healthy relationship, we need to know that we trust the person we're speaking with and we bond with them.
And so with your kids, it sounds like when you focused on listening, you were releasing that oxytocin with them, and you were probably getting some of it too. That was bonding you together with them more than you had before, because this was a newer thing for you to do with them.
Absolutely. Yes. So when I did the training and when I reflect on that pivotal moment with my son, I believe that's absolutely what happened for the first time in that whole year where we were butting heads over what he wanted to do socially and my concern for his safety. I finally listened and
Yeah.
heard, and that validated him. And yes, I do believe that the neurochemistry that occurred in that moment was so pivotal that it changed everything.
Yeah. And so before that, you talked about safety. You've mentioned safety quite a bit. We hear that a lot from parents is, oh, I got to keep the kids safe. Everything I'm doing is about safety. What can you say based on the experience you've had about where safety belongs in the overarching, here's a relationship we're having?
That's an interesting question because we all want our kids to be safe. However, we can't protect them from everything. So I have this, and I told my kids, this is my philosophy. There are big stupids and there are little stupids. The little stupids, I'm not going to protect you because a little stupid is if you make a mistake, you learn, you grow with the little stupid.
Yeah.
Now, a big stupid is when you hurt yourself or you hurt somebody else. And that's where, as a parent, I'm going to intervene and stop you from doing a big stupid if I see it coming. Like getting in a car if you have had any alcohol in your system, that's a big stupid.
Yeah.
That's not only is it illegal to do that, however, you have the potential for hurting yourself or somebody else. Getting in an argument with a friend, okay, that's a little stupid. You can figure it out. You can talk through it. You can work through it. I always told them, I'm not going to save you from everything. You've got to make your own mistakes and learn from them. But when I see a big stupid coming, mom's going to get in the way.
You drew a line under here's the threshold. I appreciate that because that allows them the space to figure out the world for most of the things that people do, but not lose an arm or life to doing things that most people shouldn't do.
Mhm.
As the parent, then, where do you see yourself in that developing relationship over time?
I think improv skills are primarily communication skills. Getting on stage, not only do I need to listen and be absolutely present, there's a nonverbal component in this. Because in improv, we don't use props. You might use a chair. That might be our only prop. But if I got a can of something, it could be soda, it could be whatever, mineral water. But I've opened a pop top and then I'm drinking it. So being attuned to the nonverbal skills, not only the physical nonverbal skills, but tone of voice, making eye contact, those types of things. So I think that's part of it because as I got into improv, sometimes I would play games. They were in middle school, early high school, do simple games such as one word at a time. It'd be kind of fun. I wanted to practice. And so who better to practice with was with a teenager because that helped them engage as well. So I did do some of that. The third component is that yes and that is the acceptance. I call it acceptance or acknowledgement that you've been heard and let me build on top. It's a tool that can be used. I use it in my coaching practice with adults now.
And when you're working with these adults, how do you offer them the opportunity to realize there's power in these listening capabilities and this acceptance and this communication? How do you enable them to tap into that?
So there's a couple of ways. I can think of two examples that come to mind. I spoke about them in my TEDx talk. One was a young woman who was on the introverted side and she had a hard time contributing to meetings. Her background and her culture, she was taught, you don't insert yourself, you sit back and you listen. She was getting feedback from her manager that you're not participating in these meetings. And that was a strike against her because in our culture, it's important that you speak up. So we use this yes and approach to help her insert herself in meetings. So when somebody contributed an idea and she had something that, oh, I have another idea, she would yes and whatever the contribution was from somebody else. And that allowed her to yes, and have we considered XYZ? She was able to successfully insert herself. And it really worked well for her because she wasn't, I think in some cultures, you're taught not to be a poppy, which is a flower that pops up higher than the others in a culture where everybody is more collective.
Yes.
And that really helped her. I had another client that was in conflict with a co-leader of a team. They couldn't see eye to eye. And I suggested, let's use a yes and approach. And in a heated conversation, my client used yes and in the conversation, and they were able to work out their differences and have a successful conversation as a result of that. So it's a very useful tool.
Yeah, it's those same lessons, the listening, the acceptance, okay, now how do we collaborate to solve for whatever it is that we're both dealing with, whether it's an improv scene or a business situation, you both have something in front of you that you're having to figure out. If you were to start your parenting journey over again with what you know now, what would you tell your younger self? This might help.
I would say listen more. As a young mom, at the time I was working full time. You come home and your kid wants to play with you. You've got to get dinner on the table. There's going to be a meltdown if your child's isn't eating at a particular time. Just taking that time, listening more, being willing to play more, or even making those moments with my child more playful. Because we learn when we play, getting them involved in how can they help me, however small. What task can I give them so they can get involved so that we can play, make this a game? I would have done more of that. I didn't see it at the time. However, I've realized over the years that the value of play, even as adults, that's how we learn. When we're having fun, we learn.
Any of your kids have kids themselves yet? Are you moving into the grandparent space?
Not yet.
You'll be part of it if you do, right?
Oh, absolutely. I'm looking forward to that day.
I think those would be very lucky kids to be able to play with you and to benefit from that experience and from that learning that sometimes it takes a lifetime to get to a place where you're like, oh, now I get it. It's play.
That's what I always tell my kids. You don't come out with instructions.
You're the first kid I've ever raised.
That's all trial by error. You learn so much during that process. Yes, I would relish the opportunity to share what I've learned and help my kids with their parenting.
Absolutely. And I think through your work, through your TEDx talk, you are sharing what you've learned, and beyond your circle of connections to people you don't know, chances are there's a lot of people out there benefiting from it, but not necessarily being able to share that benefit with you yet. Hopefully just knowing that gives you a little sense of there's good going on here because of what you've done. Well, Sonja, thank you so much for talking with me, for sharing your experience. I think you have a lot to offer the world, and I really appreciate you putting out your conversation, you putting out your training. And so is there anything else you'd like to share with this community about you, your work, your philosophy, anything like that that we could wrap up with?
Sure. If they would like to watch, it's a 10-minute video on YouTube. My TEDx is titled Moving from Battleground to Common Ground, or they could look up my name, Sonja Stetzler. I would certainly appreciate a watch, a like, and a comment. You're welcome to do that as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you for inviting me, Jeremy.